Okay, so welcome to this final session of Disability Justice in the Dharma. Today we are working with collective liberation, the 10th of Sins Invalids 10 Principles. So we're going to spend our time together in different ways. First, there's going to be, I'll offer a brief grounding and a guided meditation. Then we're going to have a brief comfort break. And I'll offer some sharings and invite some interaction. There's never any need, if you have things you want to offer, for you to either to even have your voice recorded. I can stop the recording if you don't want to have your voice recorded, and you can always be off camera. And I've pinned myself, so I should be the only image that's being recorded now. So nobody is expected to stay for the entire time. Coming and going is welcome and understood. And always you are invited to be in whatever relationship to your device that's comfortable and appropriate for you. So I want to offer some general information. My name is Laura, and I use the pronouns ki and kin to represent my belonging in the family of everything that lives. I am organizing this Zoom gathering from lands that have been cared for and tended to by many beings and creatures, including the Potawatomi and Winnebago peoples, who had no concept of land ownership. Land ownership is a concept that was brought with the colonizer. My access needs today are met, and if there are any access needs you have at any time, let me know, and if I can accommodate them, I will do everything that I can to do that. I always like to include some gratitude at the beginning of a gathering, because everything that I have to share is the direct result of contributions that have been made to me by many wise beings. So I offer gratitude to Sins Invalid, which is the disability justice-based movement, building, and performance project that is cultivated by queer, femme, disabled people of color. I offer gratitude today, especially considering that this is the last offering in this series, to two other communities, Bhumi Sparsha and Heart with Sangha, that I had the great privilege of practicing in and supporting for many years. That helped me to arrive at the place where I felt both ready and absolutely driven to offer this series of gatherings. And throughout this session, I'll offer wisdom from a number of wise beings, and I always say their names with deep bows and gratitude. So with all of that, I'd like to begin to approach some practice time. And it's always important for me to offer the reminder that the way we approach practice is just as important as what happens during practice. So starting by noticing our bodies, which is the location where practice is happening for us. Noticing anything that your body might need at this time. Noticing the waves of your breath coming in and out of your body. Noticing if it's accessible to you that there are waves of blood running through every aspect of your body right now. gently flowing, bringing energy and nutrition to every part of your body. And of course, as we practice, we're always aware that there are waves of thoughts coming in and out, rising and falling. And as we practice, we can offer to ourselves the supportive suggestion of simply being with the energy of the thought wave as it arises, rather than the content of the thought wave. The energy as it moves through, the energy as it subsides and moves away. As we approach our meditation, I'd like to offer the wisdom from a couple of wise beings. The Lama Radowans says, thinking we can't survive our brokenness is like the ocean thinking it can't survive the wave. And as we practice with the waves in our body, we are practicing with our wholeness. And Rumi has offered, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. So as we practice with the waves in our own bodies, in our hearts and our minds, we are practicing not only with ourselves, but also with the entire ocean. Is it supportive for you, bringing those awarenesses in as you begin to really settle into whatever sort of posture is going to be accessible for you for a time of meditation? Noticing whatever sort of foundation you might like to sit or rest or lay upon. Noticing what's firm or gentle or care-filled about the contact of that support. And begin to move into receiving gentle suggestions from me and allowing the waves in your practice to flow with those suggestions as they resonate with you. Suggesting first gentleness, the great capacity for gentleness that rests in our entire bodies. So often, without our awareness, that very same blood that flows through our veins carries with it the loving kindness, the loving and gentle intention to nourish the entire body, caring for you unconditionally. Sitting, lying, resting for a moment with all the sensations, all the awarenesses of gentleness in your body. many times when we notice gentleness, we might also find our awareness drawn to places of tightness, tension, pain, some kind of challenge, whatever that challenge word might best describe for you. And as these awarenesses also naturally arise in our practice, offering a suggestion of kindness and compassion. Because every experience is with every other experience. Gentleness and ease will always interbe with more challenging or uncomfortable experiences. As you are able, allowing yourself to rest with the suggestion that this is natural, that challenge, tightness, pain, exhaustion, other difficult states arise at the same time, the gentleness and care and ease arise. And just noticing that within you there is a capacity to bring kindness and compassion to the challenging states, the challenging experiences, and allowing yourself to rest just for a moment with that suggestion. Some curiosity, some gentle curiosity about the kindness and compassion within you for whatever you're experiencing. As you continue to rest and sink into being held by your own kindness, by your own compassion and understanding, allowing some expansion to come around that word understanding. Perhaps accepting as much as is possible for you the literal construction of that word, understanding, so that rather than trying to label or force a view or an interpretation, a label, a performative aspect on any experience that we are having in our bodies, we stand under it. We relinquish ourselves to it in such a way that we are open to receiving from it whatever wisdom it may offer to us about our entire bodies and our existing, our life force, our moving forward. And continuing in silence to rest into humbling ourselves and standing under the experiences in our bodies with an intention to receive and be nourished. And into this place of receiving the wisdom in our bodies, offering a suggestion of self-love and self-care. So that whatever it is we may be experiencing and receiving from our bodies, even those challenging and difficult sensations and experiences, that we call in for ourselves our capacity to have love for however it is our body is able to go forward at this moment, to have care for our body, however it is able to go forward at this moment. Our bodies going forward is a great act of love and care for each of us. Accepting that gift. Noticing your relationship to that gift. having love and care for your entire self as you receive that gift, even though it may have painful, uncomfortable, difficult, and challenging experiences. Allowing yourself to bring love to those experiences with the curiosity to notice how those experiences might best be cared for at this time. Perhaps there's some momentary change, a shift in position, an action like rolling a shoulder or moving your head side to side, shifting back and forth in some way that might bring more ease. And if there is that momentary gift that you can offer back to the body, giving yourself the permission to do so, understanding that this is part of practice. Caring for your body and its needs are part of practice. And if there is some more complicated or difficult to provide resource that your body might be asking for, taking this moment to listen deeply. The things that our body wants, we cannot always provide. We don't know what we can provide or how we could provide it until we listen deeply. So giving yourself that pause, that compassionate pause of deep listening, just to receive whatever it is your body might be asking from you as clearly as possible, resting and listening without judgment, without question, without turning away, just listening. Taking a moment to allow this to go forward in your practice. And finally, as this time of practicing with my suggestions begins to draw to a close, offering a final suggestion that you might notice the courage, the strength, the capacity that has been present in you to engage with yourself in this gentle, kind, compassionate, caring, loving, understanding way. Affirming your courage, affirming your strength, affirming your capacity. In just a moment, I will silence myself and I will offer some gentle ocean wave music for our comfort break. And you can use that time in any way that you choose, including continuing to practice with affirmations of your kindness, your compassion, your gentleness, your caring, your understanding, your courage and strength and capacity. And I thank you for practicing with me in this way. So as you are able, joining us back here for my sharing and our discussion on the 10th principle of disability justice, which is collective liberation. And I'm going to take a moment to post that principle in the chat, but please take your time to rejoin us and to become comfortable and feeling no particular need to do anything other than what best suits you at this time. So this principle, collective liberation, reads, no body or mind can be left behind. Only moving together can we accomplish the revolution we require. And one thing that comes to mind for me when I read this principle is a sharing that I received from an indigenous elder about how geese work in formation in community that as they migrate in that triangle formation, that leadership is always shared. That without any particular hierarchy that we've ever been able to observe as humans, that they simply switch places from time to time. And so that as capacity wanes in one, it is replaced and steps up by another. And this is the type of revolution, I believe, that is being talked about, one that values this type of collaborative sharing and leadership and community. As always, I like to start with a discussion of words. And in this principle, we've talked about collective before in other principles. And just a reminder that it actually comes to us from Latin through Old French and literally means to gather, and expresses a singular form of a whole consisting of a plurality of individuals. So just like a flock of geese that are all individuals, making that singular triangle formation, that we also have the ability to become a singular form of a whole while still being individuals. And Aurora Levins-Morales, who is one of the authors of the 10 Principles, has said, and I've quoted her before, anytime what we are fighting for brings us into conflict with the legitimate needs of another group of people, it's a sure sign the picture is too small. And I want to offer another recent statement from Lama Rad when he was talking about clarity of beliefs. A question to pose to ourselves: does my belief restrict your access to resources? Exactly what Aurora Levins-Morales is saying in different words. So moving on to liberation, the second word in the principle's title, we learn when we study etymology, we can learn that liberation is an act of setting free from restraint or confinement. So what's important for me there is that it's a verb, it's active. Liberation is always an act that we must undertake in order to be free. So the definition that I'm including in our word bank is that liberation is the process or action of becoming free. And this requires us to look at the word free. Well, what is freedom? So, again, we're working with English language, and this comes from many different influences: Middle English, Proto-Germanic, Old Saxon, and it can mean exempt from and not in bondage to, acting of your own will. But it also has connotations of a beloved, something that is dearly beloved. So when we were discussing, excuse me, commitment to cross-disability solidarity, we considered how commitment is a pledge or an agreement to do something in the future. So it's like a promise to be loyal to something or someone. It can represent the state or quality of being dedicated to a cause, an activity, an action. An engagement or obligation that restricts freedom of action. So interbeing exists with freedom because we have a striving, a longing, a natural inclination to be free from restraint, free from bondage. And we may love that state, but we also have, and I am going to be referring to the times when commitment arises from love, we also have a compulsion to restrict or limit or focus or redirect or shape our freedom around what we love, who we love, and how we love. So in the word bank, I'm defining free as nobly, joyfully, lovingly not being in bondage and having the capacity to act according to one's own will, even as we make commitments. And there's a really important word in the description of the principle, revolution. One reason I feel that this word is important is how deeply it resonates with the Dharma. It comes to us also in English through Latin, meaning a revolving, which can mean to turn, but it can also mean to roll back. And it has at its essence this concept of the revolving of a wheel, which resonates with the Buddhist, with the Pali word that was used to transcribe and record what Buddha spoke about suffering, which is dukkha. So, and I'm going to, because dukkha literally means bad wagon wheel, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to also call in right now how we've been looking at all of the different elements of the Eightfold Noble Path, and that in English, each of the Eightfold Noble Path elements begins with the word right. And we've talked about this a little before, but rather than a particular principle, I really want to focus on that word today. Because in Shakyamuni's day, essentially what he meant was, he was responding, reacting, and moving forward from teachings of many other sects at that time. And so what he meant when he said, right, do it the right way, he meant do what I'm saying. I'm saying my thing is different than these other teachers. Do it my way. But today we can mean this, we can understand right to mean healthful, sustainable, and supportive, particularly in the consideration of disability justice in the Dharma. Interbeing exists. There is no duality, even though we like to draw lines between what is right and what is wrong. What is healthful for us, what is sustainable and supportive for us, is always right. Right can also, in etymology, mean just, good, fair. It can mean straight, not bent, direct, being the shortest course. And this calls in how whatever our needs are, even if they may be different than someone in a normative body or someone with a different set of limitations and requirements, that whatever we need, we can call that in directly. We can consider that as the straight path to understanding ourselves, not bent. And that we are absolutely valid in trying to set the direct course, the shortest course to fulfilling our needs within the collective, within this entire plurality of individuals in our community. So, I'll turn just a moment to more discussion of the principle, but before I do that, I just want to offer an opportunity for any sort of questions or reflections just on the words that I've offered and discussed so far. So if there's something you would like to say or request, you can unmute yourself and speak. You can raise your hand, place something in the chat, whatever works for you, and I'll be silent to let that go forward for a moment. All right. So with no questions, what I'd like to move into is a consideration of what is liberation. So today we're examining collective liberation. So what is liberation? And I want to start kind of where we left off last month when we talked about collective access, because towards the end of the gathering I said, well, what is the scope of our gaze? And I was referring to access. And another way of saying that could simply be, to say, what is liberation? What is the scope of what we're looking at? There was a quote that I offered from Mia Mingus that access intimacy is critical to disability justice because there will never be any work with disabled people that does not include accessibility work. So if we are working to transform the entire world for all of us and not just for some of us, access will be a huge part of the work. There is no liberation without disabled people. And of course, normatively functioning people have their access needs met all the time. They simply, therefore, do not recognize their access needs. they become invisible. So access is always a consideration. It's just that the presence of disabled people is, in the normative construct, the bad wagon wheel, the thing that makes things go bump, the things that we have to look at differently. So today I'm wearing this t-shirt with a quote from Audre Lorde that says, "Without community, there is no liberation." So if I'm a normatively enabled person going around having my access needs being invisible, then I'm missing the liberation of the entire community. So I want to look at that word dukkha, which we translate into English as suffering. Sebene Selassie, in her book You Belong, offers this observation that in Pali, dukkha is a metaphor. So dukkha is spelled D-U-K, K-A-H, and K-A-H in dukkha actually means the axle hole of a wheel. So the wheel that's revolving, it was revolving around this axle hole where the axle sits. And the prefix du means bad. So what they were referring to is the really rough and bumpy ride you get when the axle hole that your axle sits in is not perfectly round so that the wheels can revolve smoothly. It's saying, it's we can translate it as suffering, but we could also say it's a rough ride. When are we in a rough ride? And the beauty of this metaphor that we miss when we use the word suffering is that there's a way to reduce dukkha if we consider how our axle hole is formed. What is our belief the axle sitting in? Is it perfectly round? Is it smooth? Does it fit with the reality of this axle that we have, however our axle is shaped, so that the rotation can occur smoothly? So in Pali, suffering was never static. It was always resolvable. It was always something that had a cause that we could be mindful about. So some people might think that liberation is freedom from suffering. And that's understandable because of the way that the Four Noble Truths are the Four Noble Truths are commonly phrased in English. The first one frequently simply being translated as life is suffering. And some people may think that liberation is freedom from samsara, which is the cycle of like birth, life, death, and rebirth. And this is also understandable because, Shakyamuni really emphasized transcending rebirth, trying to get to this beyond that, the cycle of life, birth, life, death, rebirth. But tantric scholar Douglas Brooks said liberation is not a solution to samsara. It's something that's available in human bodies. And particularly in regards to we have to remember that Shakyamuni didn't even teach in Pali. He was his words, he was an oral teacher. And I'm not going to be able to remember right now the dialect that he spoke, but his words were translated into Pali when they were first written down. And they come to us through many different continents and languages and translated into English and imported in the US, at least where I'm speaking from, into our culture and our interpretation. But I want to provide for you right now a formulation of Lin Shut, who is a Vietnamese-born Dharma teacher in the Zen tradition of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. She has developed something that she calls the Engaged Four Noble Truths, which is simply a different way of phrasing them. And her intention of developing this is to focus on how in our current world they can be used to actively address suffering and injustices as they exist today. So for her, number one, first noble truth, harm and harming are present. 2, understand fully the causes and conditions for harm and harming. 3, individual and collective agency for ending harm is possible. And 4, the Eightfold Noble Path empowers wholeness. I love this formulation because it calls us to look at our lives as we carry them forward today. And I believe they will apply equally 100 years from now into whatever the next today is like. And I'd like to just pause here also for any questions, comments, observations on anything I've shared so far about liberation and the Engaged Four Noble Truths. So unmute yourself, write in the chat, raise your hand, whatever you'd like. All right, if there are no questions or comments, what I'd like to move forward into now actually starts to move us towards the conclusion of my comments. So I want to offer something from a sutta called the Metta Sutta. Having cultivated for 7 years a mind of loving kindness, for 7 eons of contraction and expansion, I did not return to this world. So this portion of the quotation refers to Shakyamuni's belief that ending samsara, or the cycle of rebirth, is part of an end to suffering. And he calls in that for only 7 years, having worked with loving kindness, the result was 7 eons of benefit. Later on in this teaching, Shakyamuni addresses his followers by saying, monks, whatever grounds there are for making merit productive of a future birth, all these do not equal a 16th part of the liberation of mind by loving kindness. The liberation of mind by loving kindness surpasses them and shines forth bright and brilliant. And this brings me right back to words, because loving kindness is an English phrase. And in Pali, loving kindness was a very specific word, metta, as in Metta Sutta. And you may recall that at another gathering, I spent a lot of time looking at how there were many different words for the same sort of concept all across all the different continents in the U.S. and the different cultures. So I wanted to also now look at this word, loving kindness, because having studied bell hooks, among others, I'm aware that amongst humans, we don't necessarily all agree on what love is. Bell Hooks says, imagine how much easier it would be for us to learn how to love if we began with a shared definition. So when I started to look at love, I found that what was interesting to me is that in English we have this one word, love, that we apply to many different situations. And sometimes we do that with this hyphenation, like loving kindness or brotherly love. Right? Sometimes we try to refine the word by hyphenating it, appending it with another word. And there are other languages that do that as well. Many other languages. But if we go way back to the Greek had very specific individual words for different kinds of love. So, for instance, agape meant unconditional, selfless, and universal love, for which we have one word in English, love. They had eros, which is passionate, romantic, and sexual love, and we use the same word for that in English. They had philia, which was deep friendship, shared goodwill, and platonic affection, the loyalty and camaraderie amongst close friends. They had another word, storge, that was for familial love, that included this sort of natural, protective quality of affection that happens within families. They had a very specific word, philautia, for self-love. And they also had another word, xenia, for the deep, sacred bond and generous love shown towards guests, travelers, or strangers. I don't know that we have any concept for that in English. So the Greek culture predates the Roman culture, where we get Latin from, by several hundred years. And by this time already in Latin, there's really only about 4 different words for love. Interestingly, in Korean, they also have very specific words, not necessarily relating one-to-one with some of the things I've mentioned in Greek. So I'm sure I'm going to decimate the pronunciation because I have no training in Korean. But there is a word, saranjeya, that kind of relates to philia. It's the casual, informal, or close friendship, partners, or family type of love. But they also have words that were never present in Greek that arise from their culture. So they have a word, Sarajevo, which is sort of, and so it's a little bit like having another word appended to it because it's got the same root word, and that's for polite love. And it's the type of love that you use for in everyday use towards elders. And then there's also another sort of formulation of the word, Saranja Minda, which is formal, that I might say to you as a speaker in a crowd or working with a group of people in a speech or a classroom. It's a formal love. So a way of saying I love you, even though I don't know you. They had a concept called, or a word called jiang, and I didn't find this concept anywhere. It's uniquely Korean for the deep emotional attachment and loyalty for a bond built over a long time. They have a specific word for unrequited love, a specific word for like first love. They have a specific word for like the butterflies in your stomach type of love, at first sight thing. And they have a word for falling in love. So there are many different ways of formulating this concept into words. And this is how, in part, Bell Hooks comes to this conclusion. It's like, wouldn't it be easier for us to learn how to love and therefore to have loving kindness if we all had the same idea about what love is? And in her book, All About Love, she kind of endorses a definition from some other teachers of love, which is to the will to extend oneself for the purpose of one's own or another's spiritual growth. So think just a moment about what that would mean for you in your life if whenever you said to another person, I love you, in your mind you were saying, I am willing to extend myself for you for the purpose of your spiritual growth. Think what it would mean when you extended loving kindness or self-love, love to yourself. If you had articulated in your mind, I will extend myself for the purpose of my own spiritual growth. So loving kindness, I believe, is not this sort of sweet, saccharine, patting you on the head type of concept. It involves effort and a specific intention towards growth and spiritual wholeness. We can find this echoed in teachings of other teachers of many different kinds, while also connecting this concept of love, the love that extends, the love that nourishes and cultivates spiritual growth, that connects that with liberation, with freedom. So Maya Angelou said, really being free is being able to accept people for what they are and not try to understand all they are or be what they are, simply to accept them, not trying to understand all they are or be what they are, includes this concept of extending yourself. And Zenju Earthland Manual says there are many possible meanings or experiences of spiritual liberation as it emerges from within. So it's important to pause there. Spiritual liberation emerges from within. And she goes on to say, I experience it as freedom from projections of superiority and inferiority among sentient beings. To experience liberation in such a way is to experience authentic compassion, wisdom, love, and interrelationship. When we love ourselves in this way in which we extend ourselves for our own spiritual growth, for our own wholeness, then we are able to extend love to others in that way. It frees us from projecting onto them notions of superiority or inferiority. It liberates us when we allow others to be genuinely what they are. It liberates us also to be authentic and compassionate in ourselves. I've already quoted from Audre Lorde, without community, there is no liberation. Without this collective consisting of a plurality of individuals that we are extending this grace to, that we are extending this will to have a space for their spiritual growth. That being said, I know that there's some people that we have to extend that will from a distance. That doesn't mean that we don't. We say, we just go ahead, step back as far as you need to step back, and still have that will. More from Bell Hooks. She says, without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from an ethic of domination. A culture of domination is anti-love. It requires violence to sustain itself. To choose love is to go against the prevailing values of a culture of domination. And when I connect with some of the words in this quote, these words from Bell Hooks, it's echoing for me this turning away, this revolving, this smoothing of the axle hole, so that we are able to extend love. Even if we have to do it from way back here, we're willing to extend love in a healthy way to others and find that liberation within ourselves when we do so. And Maya Angelou said it most succinctly. She simply said, love liberates. So I've spent all this time on love because just like disability, I don't really experience love being discussed. Maybe I'm in all the wrong places, but I don't experience love being discussed that often in a critical way in which we examine, well, then what is that in mindfulness spaces? And keep in mind that I don't consider myself to be practicing mindfulness, because that wasn't the word in Pali. That wasn't the word that Buddha spoke. Buddha talked about embodied awareness, being aware in my body, using my incarnation to metabolize, understand, practice, and communicate the wisdom. So to have embodied awareness for my entire being requires love. And seems to me to be so lost in many Dharma spaces. It's kind of like we take it for granted that we all know that that is present, except are we all experiencing that it's present? Do we really know that it's present? Maybe we need to practice, starting with ourselves. Because cultures of oppression, they gain power over by trying to turn off the natural impulses to love and care for yourself. And we've been living in cultures of oppression for many centuries. I just saw the other day this quote from James Baldwin that I want to share. Let's see. So I have to paraphrase this. And he's talking about an experience he had interacting with a particular religious group. He's talking about interacting with the Nation of Islam as cultivated by Elijah Muhammad, who basically perpetuated the belief that the white man is the devil. So it's kind of like the opposite of like the traditional white Christianity that victimizes and villainizes people of color and makes them less. And James Baldwin wasn't really comfortable with that, because he's saying, well, yeah, it's really true. I mean, it might be very possible to convince a lot of African American people that there's no justice in the white man, that there's no compassion in the white man, because they haven't experienced justice from the white man. They haven't experienced compassion from the white man. But does that make it like the ultimate truth of all individuals? Is that ultimately true? And can we only try to make these judgments based on exceptions? Meaning, well, okay, well, that white person is okay. Are we using this to say, well, the exception proves the rule? But was this true, he says? How much depended on this point of view that certain people were only the exception? For it would seem that a certain category of exceptions, meaning in his case, he's talking about well-meaning white people, never failed to make the world worse. That category, precisely, for whom power is more real than love. And I wanted to bring that in because this is something that we get confused about so much in our culture. That power and love can be the same thing. That in a paternalistic family, the arbitrary rules of a father are really an expression of love as opposed to an expression of power. We see this really deeply in so many aspects regarding disability. How there was this entire exclusionary movement that first put disabled people, segregated disabled people from society, put them in institutions. But when we simply react against power, to say, no, that's not right, that exception to love, the way that you're trying to do that, that's power, not love, we miss the point, of really sinking deeply into, I love myself because I am willing to extend myself for my own spiritual growth, no matter what the circumstances I find myself in. And I accept that only this spiritual growth within this entire plurality of individuals within my community is what's going to save all of us, is what's going to provide collective liberation. And therefore, even though I may need to step way back in order to extend the grace of love to certain individuals, I will accept that doing so is what is wise and skillful, because it moves towards collective liberation. So that is everything that I had to share today. And I so appreciate having the opportunity to be in space with you here today for this last gathering in this series. And in a moment, I'm going to stop the recording. But before I do that, I want to offer a dedication of the merit of our practice together. And I'll stop the recording, and there can be any final community sharing that might like to be offered. So I am calling in an aspiration that we all be deeply nourished in ways that allow us to extend ourselves to ourselves, so that we might experience ourselves as whole and worthy and valid. Calling in this experience for all beings, so that all beings might become liberated, all beings might become free, all beings might value and extend themselves for their own and another's spiritual growth. May all of this be so. Thank you so much for practicing with me today. And I am going to stop the recording.